30. Looks like everybody's ready to go. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Lee County Board of County Commissioners Zoning and Comprehensive Plan agenda for today. It's September 2nd, 2020, and the time is 9:30. Let's begin this morning with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated.
You didn't miss a word.
All right. Our first case this morning is rezoning for the Amazon sheds and gazebos. So let's have our staff introduce that item.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Anthony Rodriguez, Principal Planner with the Department of Community Development. Our first case this morning is RAZ 2019-00020, Amazon Sheds and Gazebos. This is a request to rezone approximately 3.1 acres down toward the south end of Jean Street, just south of Alico Road, from light industrial IL to and agricultural AG2 to light industrial IL. There is a remnant parcel in the northeast corner there that's zoned AG2, and the goal of the request is just to bring it all under IL compliance, or IL zoning. The hearing examiner recommended approval. No participants of record on this one, and staff is here to answer any questions for you.
Move the item, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion for approval from Commissioner Manning, second from Commissioner Mann. Do we have any questions for our staff on this one at all? No? Do we have any, does the applicant wish to make a presentation on this one? No? Okay, very good. And there are no participants of record, so at this time, is there any further discussion?
No, probably will.
Okay. All right, seeing no further discussion, are there any objections to the motion? No objections. That motion carries unanimously.
Good work here, Manning.
All right. Please introduce the Appaloosa Lane case.
Sure. Next case this morning is case number DCI 2019-00020. This is the Appaloosa Lane Minor Residential Plan Development. This is a request to rezone approximately 14.97 acres from Agricultural AG2 and Special Commercial Office District CS2 to Residential Plan Development RPD to permit a maximum of 300 multiple family dwelling units consisting of 210 standard density units and 90 units of bonus density with a maximum building height of 55 feet. Master concept plan is shown here before you on your screens. The hearing examiner recommended approval with conditions, and there were 10 participants of record on this case, and staff is here to answer any questions, and the applicant is here as well if you'd like to hear from them.
Okay, very good. What questions do we have for our staff on this one? Commissioner Pendergrass?
I believe the applicant's going to give some detailed information from Ted Trish's report about traffic, so they're going to cover all that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. What other questions? Anything else for our staff? Okay, let's move on to the applicant presentation then.
Record, Matt Yulee representing the applicant. With me here today are my clients, Nick Paulus and Justin Griffin, along with the rest of our consultant team, Alexis Crespo, Ted Trish, and Jim Inc. We're here today in complete agreement with the staff and the hearing examiner. We have no issues with any of the conditions or anything that's been proposed. Those of you who were on the board in 2017 will probably remember this property. Initially, it was in the outlying suburban land use category, but we persuaded the board to sponsor a Lee Plan amendment to put it in the general interchange land use category. That amendment was somewhat controversial in that there were traffic issues expressed by some members of the public, but the board ultimately did approve the application, and it went into the general interchange land use category. And there were good reasons for that. The property is centrally located. It's very close to the interstate. It's got lots of infrastructure. It's located very close to a series of intense commercial uses. And the rationale for the request basically was twofold. One of them was that having a relatively dense residential use to the north of the commercial would serve as an appropriate transition to the less intense residential to the north. And the second was that given the proximity of the use to the commercial uses and the potential for interconnectivity, there was a potential here to create what amounted to a mixed-use node, which is something that you've always found to be very desirable in your LEAP plan thinking. And so that's why it was approved. The application that's in front of you today is completely consistent with the representations that were made in 2017 about what was going to be done. The only difference is that the analysis that was done in 2017 by us and the staff assumed that this property would be developed at 22 units per acre, and we reduced that to 20 in the zoning application. The master concept plan itself is relatively simple and was not particularly controversial during the hearing. The only real issue was traffic, so that's the only thing I'm really going to talk about. And there are no less than 6 reasons why you should feel relatively comfortable approving this project with the density that's being proposed today. One of them, just to go back to the comment I just made, was that this property and all the other properties in the area that were vacant, including the school board parcel, were analyzed by the staff at the time, assuming that they would be developed at 22 units per acre. The board heard the analysis. The staff concluded that it did not have an unacceptable effect on the levels of service, and the board approved that application. So all we're doing is providing less traffic than was discussed in 2017. In addition to that, during the 2017 process, the board asked the staff to look at the relative traffic impacts of a 22 unit per acre project relative to commercial uses on this property. And if you looked at the aerial photograph, you can see everything to the south of this is zoned commercial, and part of this property is zoned commercial. So a commercial use is the likely alternative to what we're proposing here. Staff did that and basically concluded that on a per acre basis that any commercial use would generate vastly more traffic than this project, in fact probably in the neighborhood of twice as much. So in a sense, what we're doing is reducing traffic from what we could be asking for rather than increasing traffic. Third, the traffic analysis that was done by Mr. Treesh and approved by the staff in this case indicated that there were no unacceptable impacts to level of service. That's the totality of the expert testimony in this case. There is no expert testimony indicating that there are problems. In addition to that, the TIS that was done in this case is unrealistically conservative. It assumed far more traffic than will actually be produced by this project. And the reason I say that is that the ITE manual creates 2 different categories for multifamily uses. There's probably a high-rise too, but there's a mid-rise category and a low-rise category. This is proposed to be a 4-story building. That's what you have to get that number of units on the property. The staff insisted that this be reviewed as a low-rise project that has a 20 to 25% higher trip generation rate than mid-rise. So the analysis that was done and approved by the staff assumed much more traffic than ITE would say would really go on the property. Fifth, the TIS that was done did not factor in the effects of the improvements that the county has projected to do in this particular area on Daniels and Palomino by 2025, which is the build-out period for this project. Those include the 8-laning of Daniels from Appaloosa to the interchange. It includes the widening of Palomino up to a point just short of my client's access point on Palomino. It includes signalization at the Appaloosa-Daniels intersection, and it includes turn lanes on the Palomino-Daniels Parkway intersection. So all those are intended to have a major positive impact on level of service, but they weren't considered as part of the TIS. And then finally, It has to be pointed out that this property has 2 access points, not one. One of them is on Appaloosa. And the reason that's important is there was a fair amount of testimony from people who were concerned about church traffic during off-peak hours, concerned that all of this project's traffic going on to Palomino would create conflicts that would be a real problem. But the fact of the matter is that the people living in this project will be able to use Appaloosa, and when the light goes in, they'll be able to make all the movements that they want to make at the light. So nobody is going to go drive into a big line on Palomino when you can go on Appaloosa and get out more quickly. So all of those reasons should give you comfort as to why there shouldn't be a level of service problem here. I'll just conclude by saying that Mr. Griffin wants you to know that he owns another building in this immediate area. He is not interested in devaluing his building by building a lousy project. This will not be a lousy project. This will be an excellent project. It's exactly what you contemplated when you approved the plan amendment, and we would ask that you approve it just as the hearing examiner recommended approval. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Very good. And will you have any of your experts come up and talk, or does this conclude your presentation completely?
Concludes our team presentation, but if you have questions that we need input from them, we can provide it.
Okay. Anybody have any questions at this time? Commissioner Pendergrass?
Matt, so I know you said there's going to be 2 access points for all the traffic improvements with the widening of Daniels, Palomino, the traffic light at Appaloosa, and 2 entrances from the community. What would be the main entrance for the community? Will it be on Appaloosa or will it be on Palomino? Because that's some of the concerns I think we heard through the Hex's testimony was traffic on Palomino because of the church traffic. I mean, I know they're going to have 2 entrances in Appaloosa, but will one be considered the main entrance, or will both be the same equal volume of traffic flow?
What I can tell you about that is that the TIS assumed a relatively even split. I think it was 60-40, with the 60 being on Palomino.
Okay.
But, I mean, that could change with circumstances. That's particularly when the light is there at Appaloosa and you can make all the movements both ways. It's just going to be whichever makes more sense for the individual driver at any given time.
Okay, thank you.
What other questions do we have? Anything?
No, I'm very familiar with this property because it was close to where I used to work. And while we talk about Palomino and Appaloosa, there's actually other ways to get in close to the property, and also a light, down a little bit farther at Danport. So I've driven it numerous times, and so we can leave for there right now.
Okay. All right. I did want to ask some questions. I don't know if you have somebody who could show us the traffic. The ingress and egress onto Appaloosa, is that going to be an emergency only, or is that going to be wide open?
It's not just an emergency access.
Okay. Is there anyone who could kind of show us how the traffic would flow through the property and how that's going to queue up and everything like that?
Ted's here.
Perfect.
Now you're getting above my pay grade.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chairman, as he's coming, I want to have him follow what Cecil's question was. I didn't completely understand the answer there about the main entrance.
Yeah, I think Ted's going to be able to respond to that probably.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was hoping to see as well.
I understand that residents will have a choice. They're going to have a choice. They know if it's Sunday at 11 a.m., they know not to go out of Palomino. They're going to go out Appaloosa. But I was just wondering, physically, appearance-wise, people draw based upon appearance and conditions. So I was just curious if you have that information yet.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ted Shreesh with TR Transportation. Commissioner, just to go to your question, technically, I guess we would define the main entrance as off of Palomino because that's where the clubhouse is. So if you're not a resident and you're going to come visit to possibly rent a unit there, that's where you would pull in to be able to visit the clubhouse. The other access off of Appaloosa would be mainly for the residents. If this is a gated community, the gates will be located off of Appaloosa and off of Palomino as such that only the residents could get through the gates, but the public would have access to the clubhouse right there at that entrance. So in that case, by definition, I guess you could call Palomino the main entrance of the community. But as you know, as a resident, you're going to take the path of least resistance depending on where you're going. If you're going to travel to the west on Daniels, you'll most likely come out Appaloosa and down to Daniels to get to the intersection to go travel to the west. And again, once the intersection is signalized down here, now you'll have two signals as an opportunity to get onto Daniels to turn left to go over to the I-75 corridor. So if traffic is heavier on Palomino, and I'm a resident of this community, I may choose to exit out onto Appaloosa. So that option will be available through both of those entrances. Commissioner, just to answer your question, the circulation is basically just a road through the property with serving the parking lots. This is the master concept plan that's currently on as part of the application. So it gives adequate access to both the east and the west to allow those residents to distribute to get to Daniels Parkway via the easiest travel path, depending on the peak times. As you're familiar with, the church does have, after their masses, they will have some traffic on Palomino that backs up during those times. That typically clears after about 30 or 40 minutes. But during those times, if I choose to exit here, I may choose to exit out to Appaloosa. The church does now have an access out to Appaloosa as well as part of their recent construction of their residential property. They constructed an access out to Appaloosa to give their parishioners an opportunity to also exit out to Appaloosa. So as that signal comes online, perhaps we'll also see a shift in the church traffic as well that might be able to travel to Appaloosa to get out onto Daniels Parkway at a traffic signal.
When is it planned to be built?
I believe staff can further clarify, but I believe this is the part of the third phase of the Three Oaks Parkway extension project that you all approved. And right now I believe it's 2023, 2024 that phase is slated to go to construction. So that'll be done probably within 2 years of that.
And I read in the reports that there was testimony that the construction would dovetail basically the apartment building or the multifamily development would basically dovetail with the improvements.
Right. That was our comments made based on, obviously this property will be based on market conditions, when it's ready to be developed. There's been kind of a slowdown recently in multifamily in the area, but as that picks back up, it's very possible that this project could come in and come online at the same time or even a little bit later from those improvements.
But not as likely that it would come on earlier than those improvements.
I mean, that's a possibility. You're just talking about market conditions of, when someone is interested in developing this piece, and that's someone other than me on this team might be able to answer that question.
I hear you. Okay. Let me just ask real quick. We got Dave over here. Mr. Loveland, any thoughts on the improvements related to the Three Oaks Parkway project and the signalization at Appaloosa and all that?
Yes, sir. I believe this signal is tied to all of the intersection improvements they're looking at Palomino and the widening of Daniels over to the interstate. All of that is in conjunction with the Three Oaks extension coming up into that intersection at where Palomino is. So it's all tied together, and it is programmed in the county's capital improvement program. I believe the time frame Ted mentioned is correct, 23, 24.
Very good. All right. All right, commissioners, any other questions then while we got the traffic expert up here? And of course, we can always ask later after we hear from the participants. Okay. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Yulee, if that concludes the applicant presentation, then we'll go ahead and move to the participants. So the way zoning hearings work is if you spoke at the hearing examiner hearing below, you'll be listed here as a participant of record. I'll call your name up to the podium. And at the top of the podium there is a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. It'll tell you when to stop. You'll get 5 minutes to talk. When the red light comes on, I will call the next speaker in order to be fair and make sure that everybody gets the same amount of time to speak. And we'll begin with the first participant of record, which was Holly Atkins. And after Holly Atkins will be Elizabeth Brody. So Holly, are you here?
No, she's not here.
Okay. How about Elizabeth Brody? Are you here? Okay. Steve Brody? No? How about Marilyn Brummer? Okay.
Good
morning.
morning.
I worked on this all through the night, literally. I'm very passionate about this project, and I'm very disorganized. Usually I have things more polished, but anyway. I live in Renaissance. I drive past this proposed development several times each week. I represent the silent majority who aren't here today because they have become disenchanted by other meetings they have attended where they felt they really didn't have a voice and decisions had already been made well in advance of the meeting. I imagine there will be a lot of celebrating tonight by several people in this room today who will profit tremendously from your decision that you claim to be making on behalf of the residents of Lee County. Who will not be celebrating ever for your decision are the residents in the low-density neighborhoods that are in close proximity to this development, the several next generations who will live on this property that has been totally abused, and the hundreds of people who will drive up and down Palomino Lane each day that will be built with a reduced setback of only 25 feet on each side. It will be like driving between a canyon, because you've already acknowledged that there's going to be the same kind of development on the other side of Palomino. Take a minute to listen to some of the exceptions that you're allowing on this property. The setback on the north side has been reduced from 50 to 30 feet. That is 20 feet of precious privacy space so that future residents of both the villas and this development will be able to practically see into each other's residences. The proposed layout of the development does not provide for sidewalks. There aren't sidewalks here. There aren't sidewalks back to service this parking area. There's no sidewalk that's designated down along this street here. And it talks about a sidewalk and having access to the bike path. Well, that's on the other side of Palomino. And you'd be taking life in your hands trying to come out of this development and cross over to the bike path. This spring, we had 2 separate biking accidents where the people were killed. One within probably a quarter of a mile of this project, and another one further up Palomino. So that's pretty good proof of how dangerous that whole area is. The closest recreation center, you've deprived the young residents of a place to even toss a football. The closest recreation center is on Bass Road, 9.9 miles away, and the closest library is on Ortiz Avenue, 8 miles away. This area has been deprived of county amenities for years. You have taken the slope away from the retention pond, saying that you're meeting the requirements of the FAA. Those weren't requirements. It was what they requested. But now you're going to have an open body of water that isn't even going to be sloped. And it's just inviting an accident with the child, because there's no other place for the child to play. And it's a pool of water that attracts children. You reduce the number of trees on the property. In comment to the very first thing, the significant difference in the residential density is possible due to the comprehensive plan amendment that reclassified the subject property, along with others in close proximity to the general energy. Staff, during the review of this application request, expressed concern about the proposed density in proximity to the ranchette properties to the west, and the applicant provided an increased setback and an enhanced buffer to ameliorate this concern. That's practically, that street isn't used that much, and you're putting a setback over there. And over on Palomino, where people come and go all the time, there's a 25-foot setback that's going to be on each side of the road. It's going to be like a canyon, driving through a canyon. They talk about bicycle facilities. I told you, it doesn't connect. There isn't a sidewalk there, and there's no sidewalk over here either for a section of this area. And it says that bicycle and pedestrian facilities, the subject property, these facilities connect to Daniels Parkway, they don't, and the greater bicycle pedestrian network described on the lead plan map. Currently, no bicycle pedestrian facilities exist on Appaloosa Lane. At the time of development order approval, all new development must comply with the bicycle and pedestrian requirements contained in Chapter 10. So they're required. You're requiring that they're there, but they're not. But then you also say that there's a provision that they're going to put a sidewalk over here, but They don't have to if they pay into some kind of a Lee County fund.
Ms. Brummer, thank you for your comments and your time this morning. At this time, I'd like to call up Thomas Burt.
We can hear you now.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank you for listening to us this morning. I know it feels like 2020 is taking a lifetime, but if you look back, it really, think about 30 years ago. Daniels Parkway was a dirt road. Then it became a 2-lane road. Now it's going to an 8-lane road. Daniels Parkway is exploding, and it's wonderful. Think about it right now. You have one Target, one Whole Foods. You have 2 Publixes, 1 hospital, 2 baseball stadiums, and RSW, essentially all in the same main thoroughfare. What you have here is a project that's actually going the other way. They're actually reducing density, reducing the impact of a potential use. What this organization is trying to do is they're actually trying to put in affordable housing for people like your first responders, your essential employees. And they're trying to meet the needs of the community because you've had a lot of commercial development, but not the coordinating amount of residential development, especially with affordable housing. So here you have something that's meeting the needs, it's actually reducing the impact on the community, and it's also increasing your tax base for the commissioners to put back into the community. So, what I would tell you is that this project is going to add a lot of value to the community. It's going to address a lot of needs for people who are commuting to Naples, commuting up to Punta Gorda, because there's going to be a lot of people who are your essential employees that don't currently have that option right now. And, of course, it is not going to impact as much as this commercial property / industrial property could have. It's actually more in line with the current situation over there. When you start looking at Renaissance, you start looking at some of the homes. The last thing I would want is a heavy industrial going in, some kind of complex where you have people coming in and out to 7-Eleven, whatever it might be. There could be a lot worse projects than homes for families on this piece of property. So it's not, when you think about the question that we're answering here today, it's not if or when this parcel is going to get developed. It's how this parcel is going to get developed. And I don't think there's a better use for this parcel to get developed than for multifamily homes for your average person in Southwest Florida. We've got a lot of property that has been developed. If you look on the map, anything west of 75, there's very little green space. So if you're going to have multifamily homes, you're running out of room, anything west of 75. So this is a great parcel to put that property, put that type of endeavor in. I urge you to vote in favor of it. I think it'll add a lot of value and address a lot of people's needs in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burt. All right, let's call up T. Patrick Connor. Go ahead.
Probably be able to understand me better if I take that off.
Good morning.
Pat?
Commissioner. My name is Patrick Connor. I've lived in Reflection Isles and Cross Creek Estates. Both communities are close to the rezoning effort. I've lived there for over 20 years, so I know that area pretty good. However, before I detail my request, I would like to thank the commissioners and especially Commissioner Pendergrass for our new bicycle pedestrian path down the side of Palomino. That has made a world of difference to the residents, and we really appreciate it. Thank you for that. The Daniels Parkway corridor is overburdened at this time. I'm specifically referring to the stretch of Daniels between I-75 and 6 Mile Cypress. This stretch of Daniels supports 14 communities with a total of 6,486 residents, give or take. That's over 10,000 automobiles. These communities rely on Daniels Parkway. We frequently experience significant delays, and we have no alternative. There is no alternative for these communities. We don't need another 400 vehicles added to our traffic problems. Today, several of the intersections with Daniels in that area are very dangerous. In the staff report associated with this project, Attachment L states that the Palomino-Daniels and Appaloosa-Daniels intersections will be significantly impacted. My wife and I have both, on different occasions, had accidents, been hit at the Palomino-Daniels intersection. It is dangerous. This intersection will only become more dangerous with the completion of the Galleria West project, allowing commercial development of the property on the east side of Palomino at Daniels. This commercial development is, I just learned, will be right across Palomino from the main entrance to the new development. I don't think that's going to be good for the intersection. The Three Oaks North Extension project, in my opinion, will dump more traffic on this overburdened section of Daniels. I believe the current plans are to widen Daniels from 6 to 8 lanes where Three Oaks will enter. However, in about 1/2 mile, Daniels will go back to 6 lanes. That sounds like a design for a traffic jam to me. One way to help the Daniels corridor problem would be to build alternative exits, probably to 6 Mile Cypress, for all these communities north and south of Daniels. Penzance, which is north of Daniels, was originally scheduled to go to 6 Mile Cypress. That would have been a great help, but it never happened. It was canceled, okay? The other, maybe more important issue with this rezoning is property values. For many of us, our home is our major investment. To say this is an upscale area is an understatement. There are homes in both the Renaissance and Fiddlesticks valued at over $1 million. Why would a prospective buyer driving by this bonus high-rise development on his way to see a nice home in Reflection Isles not think his investment would be safer in another area? Got a lot of choices. And the first thing he's going to see when he drives up Palomino is this development. Honorable gentlemen, my request is that based on the impact to property values and on the dangerous Daniels Corridor traffic problem, that you not approve rezoning of this parcel to high bonus density or commercial. If it must be rezoned, change it to single family or townhomes, something that will fit within this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, let's call up Carol Davis. Carol, are you here? Not here. Okay, how about Robert Galla? No. Peter Lombardi. And how about Marcy Taylor? Marcy Taylor? Okay, very good. All right, that concludes our participants of record for this. Does the applicant wish to rebut anything?
Matt Ewley for the record. I'd like Alexis to talk about the sidewalk and connectivity issue, and then I have a couple of brief comments.
Excellent, okay.
Mr. Chairman, as she's coming forward, could I express one concern that I want somebody to try to answer?
Sure, Commissioner Mann.
Ms. Brummer's comments about trees, fewer trees, and whatnot. I remain confused after all the years I've been privileged to serve here as to what happens in the development order stage and what happens here in zoning. Is there anything you can share with me and her that would give her some hope that in the next step toward development that some of her concerns would be responded to?
I'm not sure exactly what she's referring to. We haven't asked for any deviations from landscaping, and in fact, we have enhanced buffers on the site. I think what she may be referring to is a number of deviations that the county told us we were required to ask for because of the proximity of this property to the airport. There are rules in place that basically say we don't want property around the airport to be wildlife attractors. So there were, I believe, 3 deviations that the staff told us we had to ask for, and we did ask for, and were recommended for approval. I'm guessing that's what she's talking about. Otherwise, there's no proposal to reduce landscaping. It's going to be enhanced.
I could also, Commissioner, if you look at the aerial, that land is currently, it was cleared years ago. It was pasture land. There's really only a few trees out there, some pines, and if you look at the area, there's really not, it's not a tree habitat now. So it's just currently just flat land with some grass growing on it. So there's a couple trees. If you look, there's probably 20 pine trees on the 15 acres. So it's not like a forest now. It's not completely landscaped.
Maybe I should have directed my question to Mr. Loveland, which, can I do that right now? Just
Yeah, go ahead. And I'm glad to hear that Ms. Crespo is going to address the sidewalks. That was one thing that was on my mind. But yes, very good.
At development order stage, what are the main concerns of your staff?
We're looking to ensure that the requirements of the county's land development code, and particularly Chapter 10, are being met with the development of the property. It's more detailed than what you get at the zoning stage, and so there is landscaping requirements and everything that go with that. And as Mr. Yulee said, they haven't asked for a deviation from the landscaping requirements as part of this. There's some buffer issues, and they've actually proposed enhanced buffers in some locations. So, the details of the landscape plantings and things like that would all be part of the development order process.
Okay, let's see what y'all's comments are. Thank you.
Good morning. Alexis Crespo with Waldrop Engineering representing the applicant. First, to answer the sidewalk question. So there is an existing sidewalk facility on the east side of Palomino. We will be required to install a sidewalk per your land development code along our Palomino frontage, which would be the west side of Palomino. So we will provide that connectivity that will connect down to Lee Tran facilities on Daniels Parkway, as well as that multi-use path that runs east and west along Daniels. So
okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to ask about. So, I agree that this is maybe an infill and mixed use opportunity. So you'll be required to do a sidewalk on Palomino that'll connect down to the commercial to the south of this development?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Similarly, there is an existing sidewalk along the Appaloosa frontage, so that facility exists. We are required per your code to provide connectivity throughout the project. So once this design gets into that development order construction plan phase, we'll design the internal sidewalk system so folks are able to actually leave this property and walk down to restaurants that are in the immediate area and on adjacent parcels.
Excellent, okay.
And then I just would like to touch on the enhanced buffers because, sorry.
I just wanted to comment because we heard that from another speaker, Mr. O'Connor, about the 8-foot wide path the county put in this past year. So that's what Alexis is responding to on the east side of Palomino. So it's across the street, kind of like the older communities there do not currently have sidewalks like Danforth Lake. There's no sidewalks on the west side of the road, just like Renaissance does not have sidewalks coming out from their entrance by the gas stations there. But there's, this would be connectivity. They would have a path that would connect to that then. So I'm just making sure that's clear, because that was one of my concerns early on, was making sure that we spent all that effort the last few years putting that 8-foot wide multi-use path down Palomino, that this would be able, those residents would be able to get to it safely.
Okay, thank you very much. And you were going to talk about the landscaping?
Yes, so the property is required to meet your open space requirements. We're not seeking any deviations, so this will have the full open space required by your code. Because there is not existing native vegetation, we don't have to meet that code requirement because it has been cleared for pasture use. In terms of our buffers, along the northern buffer, we are proposing double the trees, and we're proposing to plant those at 14 to 16 feet at the time of planting, so that there will be a lush green view from the neighboring property to our north at the time of construction of the project. So that will be immediately concurrent with the development, and they don't have to wait for the trees to grow up over several years. And we're doing a similar treatment along Appaloosa with a 55-foot setback, so we're really pulling the buildings in off Appaloosa because that is how we transition down to lower density to our west, and we're again enhancing that landscape buffer with more plantings, taller plantings, et cetera.
Okay. Very good. What other questions do we have, commissioners?
Good right now.
No? Okay. All right. All right, seeing no further questions, is there anything else, Mr. Yulee, you wish to address?
I just want to say that I understand that on the part of some of the residents, there's a desire to have this be sort of bucolic farmland, but that horse left the barn a long time ago, and particularly when you made this an interchange. The vision for this property is an intense development, either an intense residential use or an intense commercial use. And as I said in my initial presentation, the intense commercial use generates far more traffic than this does. So we think that we're doing something that's in everybody's best interest. Thank you.
Very good. All right, Commissioners, at this time, it's time for the board to consider the property.
There was a hand up.
No, we don't take questions from the audience. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I will move the hearing examiner's recommendation, which is approval with conditions, and the staff's recommendation.
Okay, so we have a motion from Commissioner Manning for the hearing examiner recommendation. Do we have a second? Second from Commissioner Sandelli. Very good. Do we have any further discussion on that item?
I just want to say that during the public comment, we heard about some tragedies we had. We had a few months ago, we had a bicycle accident at Daniels and Appaloosa. That intersection was just a stop sign intersection. So hopefully all these improvements that's occurring over the next 5 years, the county's doing, and all the improvements to this area is going to help that stuff from happening. It was a bicyclist heading westbound on the sidewalk and crossing Appaloosa on Daniels. In the future, there will be a traffic light there, which we provide pedestrian safety crossing. So hopefully those accidents will not occur when these improvements are, because there's a lot of improvements coming in this area. Thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Sandelli?
Just a couple comments. I think the multi-family component of our community is extremely important. It offers a lot of flexibility for people that are coming into the area who may be here temporarily or looking at intermittently before they go to a single-family home. So I think it plays an important part in how we address the housing situation, which I think was missed before. The other thing that I always look at is, from a traffic perspective, the proximity to 75. So we're not midpoint down between, say, 41 and so on and so forth. So you can come out, you can jump on 75, go north or south, and so I think that mitigates it. The other thing is, it was mentioned before, that we build nodes, and so if you look at the support, whether it's at Publix or so on and so forth around this, again, helps mitigate traffic having to go long distances, between the residents and whatever. So, there's some challenges always in growth. I think this combined, put together, I think makes some sense.
Anything, Commissioner Mann? Yeah.
Just a quick comment. I supported this 3 years ago when we made the fundamental changes that would allow for what we're doing here today to be requested. And I thought that basic change in the future land use map was appropriate for this parcel. The density is always a concern of mine, and frankly, the density with the bonus density that is thrown in here, and envisioning Daniels Parkway today and the traffic and how I try to avoid it every chance I get, I'm still concerned about the density, and I wish this could have been toned down a little more than the 22 to 20. That just didn't quite get the job done. So I think they've made some good efforts to do the right thing by this parcel, but I'm still not quite convinced that this is the best we could do. So, thank you.
Okay.
I drive this area every day, and I think the Commissioner Manning has the other same concerns I have as far as traffic, but I think the problem with the traffic is not this future of this development. It's current now is the traffic. Most of this traffic on Daniels has come from Lehigh Acres, East Lee County. It's coming from while we say here the last year, the city of Fort Myers approved over 5,000 units on Tree Line, which accesses Daniels Parkway. So as we're looking 300 units here, the city approved 5,000 units on Tree Line, which accesses Daniels. So it's a regional issue. And that's why we're looking at doing those improvements on Daniels, the 8 lanes on Daniels, and the Three Oaks Parkway extension is going to help. So it's a concern. It's a concern of all of us. I drive it every day. I drive this neighborhood every day. So it's just every little bit, hopefully, just another piece of the pie. But looking at what this could have been in the future, if it could have been commercial, I mean, this area, if you look at this area, it's been very inconsistent. You have commercial. You have commercial in the front. You have a maximum security jail basically in one corner. You have hotels. You have a really high-end gated community. Then you have restaurants. Then you have ranchette homes. So it's been very inconsistent. This is at least bring us some consistency to the area, some compatibility. I mean, that's the good thing about the project. So traffic's always a concern, though. I drive it every day, and I'm going to hear about it every night. But it's hopefully the improvements come in this with the extra sidewalks, the bike lanes, the extra traffic signals is going to help, and the widening of Palomino, the widening of improvements to the Kings Crossing intersection. That's the one behind by the Walgreens. It's going to help all this before this is actually, wish it was done before the development came, but we're having to do it at the same time.
Okay. All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll go ahead and call the question then. Are there any objections to the motion? Okay, the motion carries 4-1. Commissioner Mann objects. Okay, let's move to our final case of the day. This is a comprehensive plan amendment, the Small Brothers Commercial Comp Plan Amendment.
Okay. Final case this morning is a text and map amendment. CPA 2019-00009 is the text amendment. CPA 2019-00011 is the map amendment. Small Brothers Commercial is the name of the project. This is a request to amend policies 1.4.5 and 33.3.5 and to create objective 33.5 to allow commercial development on properties located in Southeast Lee County with previously approved commercial zoning in the Density Reduction Groundwater Resource, or DRGR, future land use category. Also included is a staff-initiated amendment to amend policy 55.1.3 to maintain consistency with state statutes. CPA 2019-00011 seeks to amend maps 6 and 7 to add 12.1 acres that comprise the subject property before you to the Lee County Utilities future water and wastewater service areas. The LPA heard this request on July 27, 2020, and made a motion to transmit CPA 2019-00009 with modifications. The modifications included requests to revise the language to further address impacts to species, impacts to flowways, and to rewrite policy 33.5.1, subsection 5 for clarity. And the motion was also to recommend transmittal of the map amendment to add this property to the wastewater and future water service areas. Staff has incorporated the LPA recommended modifications to the transmittal package and does recommend that the board transmit both the text and map amendment as outlined in the staff report attached to your packet today. Staff is here to answer any questions, and the applicant is here to make a presentation as well. And this item obviously is open to the public.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for our staff before we go to the applicant? Commissioner Mann?
Help me understand the line that you just read, or maybe Mr. Jacob wants to answer this, I don't care who, to maintain consistency with state statutes, which seems to be driving why we're here today, to maintain that consistency. What is the state statute that has occurred that's making us consider this right now?
The one subsection of the text amendment is to amend policy 55.1.3. The South Florida Water Management District advised staff that the reference to the water supply work plan was not sufficient to be consistent with state statute. So that was rolled into this amendment in order to ensure consistency with state statute. Does that make sense?
It almost oversimplifies it. It's a water issue, you're telling me, that brought to our attention by the district.
The citation and the water supply work plan does not reference a specific year, and the South Florida Water Management District advised that the year of the water supply work plan needed to be included in the Lee plan cross-reference. So we're just inserting a year, 2017.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yeah,
could help.
Mr. Loveland? Sure.
This is a common thing from the state in terms of when you reference another document in your comprehensive plan, they want you to reference the particular version of that, what date that is, because they don't want self-amending things in your plan. As that document changes, then you would have to modify your plan to make sure it's still relevant by referencing the new version of that.
Okay, thank y'all.
Okay.
Sure. Head going up and down, say what they said. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, any further questions then before we hear from the applicant? All right, let's go ahead and call up the applicant. Morning.
Morning. All right, for the record, my name is Dan DeLisi. I'm a land use planner, and I am here on behalf of the applicant today. I'm going to run through the presentation so we don't have people, getting up, sitting down, interrupting the flow of things. But we do have our full project team here. Kirk Martin for groundwater, Drew Fitzgerald, who looked at surface water, Ted Treesh, Neil Montgomery, our attorney, and Tyler with Dex Bender and Associates. So as staff mentioned, this is the location of the property. It's at the corner of Alico and Corkscrew Road. You can see just on the aerial, I'll point out, the active mine to the north, and I'll touch on that in a little bit because it certainly makes things a little obvious when you talk about water flow. Corkscrew Shores is directly to our west as well, and Wild Blue, you could see the development of, is to our northwest. So a lot's been going on in this area, as you know, with a lot of prior decisions. Most recently, about 6 months ago, you all approved a text amendment to allow commercial in the Southeast Lee County community up to 300,000 square feet. Since that time, and that came through concurrent with the Verdana Village application, they only proposed 100,000 square feet. The golf course that came in last month that you all approved for adoption, that was 100,000 square feet. There's still roughly 60 to 100,000 square feet remaining, depending on how you look at what's been approved in the area. This property, as you could see, is located in a different portion of the DRGR. We are on the west side of Flint Penn Strand. It's a smaller piece. It's something that will accommodate somewhere between 60 and 70,000 square feet of commercial floor area. It's not looking at a public shopping center, that type of thing. It's too shallow for that type of use. It's smaller retail shops, something to service the neighborhood itself, and it's a slightly different neighborhood. If you have the golf course providing 100,000 square feet and Verdana Village providing 100,000 square feet to our east, this is mostly going to serve, Bellaterra, Corkscrew Shores, some of the traffic from the place and Verdana Village, but by and large, it's a different type of commercial than the last two that you've seen come through. But again, there's a lot going on in the area, and the purpose of this is to provide that commercial need to this neighborhood. I will tell you, I did a needs analysis on this, and so I'll skip that slide later. When I looked at it, I looked at a planner rule of thumb, which I've used in the past, which is 40 square feet per capita. I cut that in half because you want to take out the regional attractors. This area, we're not trying to put a big box that would attract people from a region. We're trying to service the immediate neighborhoods. I cut that in half and then looked at the 7,500 units that would be from the preserve east, including the environmental enhancement and preservation overlay communities. So that's what we're looking at in the area. This property is somewhat unique in the DRGR because it was zoned for commercial in 1982. So when the DRGR was established, it didn't always look at what was zoned and permitted on the ground. The DRGR itself doesn't allow commercial, so you have a conflict between the zoning map and the comprehensive plan. Now, as we know, the comprehensive plan is the controlling document, so the property is not allowed to develop it as commercial unless we do an amendment to allow for the property to develop in accordance with its zoning. And the zoning map, of course, reflects that. Nothing has ever changed on the zoning map after the 1989 amendments for the DRGR. The future land use map, you can see the properties in the DRGR and the wetlands future land use category. One thing to note on this is you all went through an amendment on wetlands, so you're very clear on how we designate the wetlands future land use category. That's done very conceptually. 5,000 foot level. You don't have exact line work. When someone does an official jurisdictional determination from the South Florida Water Management District or the DEP to establish what their wetland lines are, those are the areas of the wetland designation, and the other areas are the adjacent underlying future land use category. So we've done that. We actually have a South Florida Water Management District jurisdictional determination. We have the wetland line, so we know what on the property is wetlands, what's uplands, and the upland areas are DRGR. This is the proposed amendment. It's in your packet, and I'm just going to run through briefly some of the high points. The amendment is created to be similar to policy, objective 33.4. And 33.4, you all created, if you remember, Corkscrew Shores, was similar to this in that prior to the designation of the DRGR, it was entitled for more density than the DRGR would allow. So they created an objective, 33.4, that allowed for residential development entitled prior to the DRGR to develop in accordance with those entitlements, and they included increased open space and preservation criteria. We then did the same, created objective 33.5 to allow for this property, and there is one other, the Corkscrew, God, I forget the name of it. It's just slipping my head. The one out east on Corkscrew Road, the Corkscrew Country Store, I think it's called. That's also designated CC on the zoning map to develop in accordance with those that entitlement. The difference is here we're requiring extension of central water and sewer. We're requiring very limited wetland impacts. You can't have buildings in wetlands. You need to avoid wetland impacts to the greatest extent possible. So we have a lot of language in here about the avoidance of wetlands, and most key is that you're not getting commercial intensity. Your commercial intensity is established by your upland area, so there's really not a whole lot of benefit to going in and just clearing a site. If you don't get any additional commercial square footage, the only reason why there are any wetland impacts allowed is wetlands aren't always located in the places you want them to be located, and in the lines for wetland lines aren't straight lines. They can have juts out, and so nicking wetlands is something that is very common in development. But there are very strict limitations on what you can do for wetland impacts, which creates a much more significant open space and preservation requirement than anywhere else in Lee County outside of the DRGR. There are also requirements for additional stormwater water quality treatment. There's requirements for protection of the groundwater resources, a requirement to restore any historic flowways, and staff added an additional policy to make things consistent with other areas of the DRGR to provide for bear-proof containers and grease traps so that you have that wildlife protection that Anthony was talking about before. I already talked about retail need. Transportation, I'm not going to go into the TIS, and Ted's here if he wants to talk about, if you want him to talk about it. There really was not a lot of difference of opinions on transportation. The reality is we're trying to serve the immediate surrounding community. So from a transportation standpoint, this should be a positive thing. We held 2 community meetings. We held a community meeting early on in this process, which was about 2 years ago now. With the East Corkscrew Alliance, we met at the Corkscrew Shores Clubhouse. About 15 people were there. Generally, we heard a lot of support for additional commercial along the corridor. I think people are tired of driving to Grandeza. You do have some commercial coming out there. Again, this is in a different location and much more strategic for some people. So that was very favorably received. The only questions that we heard were, what kind of buffering would you have, with the adjacent Corkscrew Shores development? There's a required meeting that you have to have in the DRGR if you're proposing anything. We did the public notice on that. We held a meeting at FGCU. No one attended, but we went through the presentation anyways, and that was an uneventful meeting. We have reached out to all the public facility providers. We have letters of availability from all of them. And we have done an extensive analysis on wellfield protection, which, again, if you have any more detailed questions, we have Kirk Martin here who can answer those for you. Now, at the LPA hearing, as staff mentioned, there were two issues that came up, and let me address the issue on the right side of the screen first, because that's really easy. Obviously, throughout the DRGR, there's wildlife. There are panthers, there are black bears. When you look at the panther telemetry, for whatever reason, they avoid our site. It's probably because the site is so heavily infested with exotic vegetation, but whatever the reason is, there aren't any telemetry points, but they're around us. We are in panther habitat, and when we go through our Army Corps permit, we're going to have to mitigate for panther impacts to habitat anyways. It's no different than any other development out in the DRGR, regardless of whether there are telemetry points across your property or not. We still need to mitigate. The second issue that came up has to do with this middle graphic. And, let me just say that this is an unfortunate aspect of a modeling exhibit that is not well understood and complicated in engineering speak, and there's a lot of misperception here. The concern that came up was this exhibit comes from the DHI study that was done in conjunction with the Dover Coal Report back in 2010. And when DHI set up their model, they did an existing conditions model where they took a look at generally what was happening in the area. And there is a line, it looks like a blue flow line that goes through our property. Now, if you were to ground truth it, that would actually go through an upland area, but it would also have to go through an active mine before it did that. And as most of you know from dealing with mining permits or mine applications that have come before you, mines can't discharge water. You have to retain everything on site. So even if this line were coming through a mine, the mine would have blocked that flow. But I'm here to tell you that that line doesn't exist in reality. You could see it on the aerial. You could see on the historic flowway map, everything's flowing from northeast to southwest throughout the entire area. Flint Penn Strand is over here to our east. That's flowing from northeast to southwest. All of this development, this residential development here, that flows northeast to southwest away from this property. But we went back and we checked with someone who was involved with the modeling to find out why this line is even on this map. And what we got was it's a modeling, and I'm not a modeler, so Kurt will have to come up and explain this to you if you have any questions. But it's a modeling artifact that was used to calibrate the model, but it's not based on anything historic or current. That's what we got. So it's an artifact in there to show generally there may have been some flow that flowed towards Flint Penn Strand, but it's not across our property. We've ground truthed that. We've looked at it. As you know, water doesn't flow up onto wetlands and down. It doesn't flow across hills. It's just not there. But let me boil this down. To the extent that there is any flow coming onto our property, small or large, state rule requires us to do a pre and post analysis in our environmental resource permitting. So we would need to analyze what's coming onto the property in the existing condition and make sure we accommodate that in our developed condition. So even if there was flow coming on our property, we would absolutely have to accommodate that by state rule. And that's part of the state's flood protection and flood control rules that they have in place in your environmental resource permitting. So I just want to put that out there. Just in summary, and this is my last slide, the project provides a service. It's a need identified by us. It's a need identified by your staff, and it's a need we've heard in the public. It fits within the overall context of the Lee plan, of things that you've done prior, things that you've been doing since then. And the text amendment itself provides for a greater level of preservation, open space, water quality, and protection of your groundwater resources. And with that, I will close.
Okay. What questions do we have for the applicant or the team? Commissioner Pendergrass?
Yeah, real quick. So the property, totally familiar with it. So when you look at the aerial, it's directly next door to a current planned development. I think it's the Shores.
Yeah, Corkscrew
It's
Shore.
next door to a residential unit. It's along a major highway, Corkscrew, which is that's going to be before laying out to Alico over the next 5 years in our CIP. Across the street is a mine. So we had a couple emails. We always get comments on these cases and of concern about groundwater. You already touched on that and everything. I'm just curious what the concern is. I understand it backs up to some preserve areas, but it's already an area that's going to be 4-lane in the near future. It's next door to existing, which was a mine to the west of it. It's across the street from a mine that was already mined. It's still active. So
I'm being totally honest here.
Yeah.
I can't figure it out. I don't.
There's already commercial already approved in the area, so I'm not really sure what the concern. I'm sure we'll hear about it. I'm just trying to figure out. It's at an intersection of Alico, which would be a major intersection in the near future. It's already a currently major intersection now. We have Lee County utilities across the street. So
I can't figure out what the issue could be. I mean, it's a shallow parcel. The environmental benefit is minimal. Tyler could talk to you about how heavily infested the property is with exotics. All of that will need to be cleaned up.
I think you were concerned. I think you're right. There's some pines and pepper trees out there, but I know there's surface water we know is going to go somewhere, and that's going to be directed through the permitting through the state. But I think some of the comments were the groundwater, how it's going to affect the groundwater, but we know it's not part of that flow. It is on the northern portion of that flow there.
So we're going to have to restore any historic flowways on the property to the extent that they come on our property. There's a requirement here that we can't have any stormwater within the one year and 6 month travel time zones. So we have to relocate all of that to the western portion of the property. We've worked hard with staff on this. I think we have a lot of protections in plan. I think the one thing I wanted to mention, for staff and to make it clear, we have committed to doing a plan development as well. So we won't just move forward with our existing conventional zoning. And we are going to put the skids on this post-transmittal to let the zoning to catch up. And so hopefully by the time of adoption, depending on how that works, you guys have been in this a lot. You've known that. But we've committed to, at minimum, waiting to take this to the hearing examiner before we take it to you guys. So we'll have a plan. Staff will be comfortable that everything's fleshed out from a site planning standpoint, and we can move forward like that. But we've been in the process for a couple of years. We've done a lot of data and analysis on this, and I think, I mean, we're pretty comfortable that we're not negatively impacting anything.
I guess what I was trying to get to, the surface water would be captured within the property, and then it would be filtered before you even get to the groundwater. So, and it would be filtered before it even would kick the capture in the headwater. So, I'm not really sure any more than it is now currently off of Corkscrew. Now there's surface water there coming off of Corkscrew now.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Real quickly, just wanted to have you restate, Dan. So that was one of the things I think about when we think about the environmental enhancement overlay in this area. Was, you know, so we required or we got significant environmental enhancements. You're saying on your property, if there are historic flowways, you would have to reconnect them, similarly to what we've seen in the previous developments that have gone through this area?
Yeah, and let me be clear on that. When you look at the historic flowway map, it looks like one nicks one of our wetland areas, but by and large, there probably aren't any historic flowways. But it's the wetland preservation requirements that cause us in our site planning and the way you establish intensity on the site to cause us to come up with an open space and preservation requirement that is far more than commercial sites typically would have to provide.
Okay. Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to get at. What environmental enhancements are we getting? I understand now. It sounds like you'll extra protections for the wetlands that are on the property, the water and sewer connection, as opposed to using, well and septic, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Okay, very good. And then just talk about the intensity of it. I mean, this is not going to be a regional mall or anything like that. What would be a good fit for something like this?
It's neighborhood shops. Barber, cafe, those types of uses, real estate office, the things that would service the immediate neighborhood.
Right, because right now a lot of folks who are going to live in these units to the east and west of this are going to have to drive all the way over to Ben Hill Griffin Road or something like that.
Yeah, Grandeza is right now the closest. You can get some very small things all the way out east of Verdana Village at the Corkscrew Country Store. But by and large, as you've heard in prior hearings, people go into the golf course clubhouse to try and buy a sandwich because they don't want to drive 7 miles to the interchange for every single need. So as things start developing, I think you'll see a more cohesive community where you don't have everything traveling west for every single service need, and you'll see people being able to stay within this general region to be able to meet most of their neighborhood shopping needs.
And then just thinking about the land to the south of this, that's preservation?
It is. That's all in. I forget if Lee County or the South Florida Water Management District owns it, but that's in public ownership.
So it's not like this could be precedent setting that would then allow further expansion south. That's already off the books. It's preserved.
Preserved to the south and to the east.
Okay. All right. Any further questions, then?
Let me see if I can further confuse myself on this. Mr. DeLisi, I'm reading on page 2 of 12 in the staff report here under future land use category. The subject property has been designated as DRGR and wetlands on future land use maps since 1990. Now that's when what happened in 1990?
The DRGR was established.
Yes. So, and the additional protections and limited densities, et cetera, that came with the DRGR protection. And one of our, is it the 33.3.5 policy changes? Says commercial uses may only be permitted if on property with existing conventional commercial zoning approved prior to that September date in 1990. So in essence, we're taking this out of the DRGR and allowing commercial use with certain restrictions.
We're not taking it out of the DRGR, so
It's still in it, but it's making exceptions so you can use it for commercial, which otherwise you wouldn't have been able to do.
exactly, and that is entirely consistent with how Corkscrew Shores was done. So Corkscrew Shores, if you look at the future land use map, that is still in the DRGR, but the way the objective reads is, residential development that had greater densities prior to the establishment, prior to whatever the date is in 1990, can move forward with that density under these conditions.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, if there's no further questions, then we'll move to the public comment portion. We got several cards. Now, this works a little bit differently. Public comment here is open to the public. You'll have 5 minutes. Remember the green light, yellow light, red light will tell you when to stop. And when the red light does come on, just to be fair to everybody, I'm going to go ahead and call the next speaker. Our first speaker is Serge Thomas, followed by Marcia Ellis. Morning.
Good timing. Just came back from the restroom.
Perfect.
Serge Thomas. I'm an associate professor at FGCU, and I'm sorry I was not aware that there was something going on regarding this at FGCU. And I'm also the president of the Florida Lake Management Society, and also live in the neighborhood where that facility will be built. So I'm an aquatic ecologist, right? So I have a lot of concern about this development. And the main reason is that I've been very busy this summer dealing with a lot of water crises that deal with Estero Bay, deal with retention, detention ponds. And the wetlands are really useful, right? They are useful because they filter the water, and they also allow the water to be moved to the right direction. What we've seen so far in my neighborhood is that the residents actually never really got flooded before. However, we have a lot of development that actually took place and kind of blocked the flow. And where the facilities will be built, you have basically a little gullet or a little funnel where the water actually goes through, especially during time where you have extreme events, for example, hurricanes, right? So what I've seen here with a presentation from Mr. DeLisi is that it looks like it might work during normal flow, but what do we do during extreme flow events? And the last one we had during Irma, pretty much the flow was blocked, completely blocked, because it has nowhere to go, and there is not a lot of gravity to help us to move the flow from the eastward toward the west, unless you put a lot of pumping stations. So even if this facility is small, it still is a blockage, and I will use an analogy with, we want to move the water south of Lake Okeechobee, but we want to move the water southwest to the region so they get filtered, and the water doesn't really pile up, flood the neighborhood upstream of it, and eventually move water that has not been filtered to the west into the bays. So that's really one of my main concerns is flow. As Mr. DeLisi was saying, we don't really well understand the flow because it's changing all the time. We have so many development that took place. And in Florida, just 1 inch of elevation makes a lot of difference. And the technique where we use to measure elevation on the land, unless you actually go there and ground truth, when we're using LiDAR, some aerial survey, it's not very accurate. So a little change of elevation makes, in error, make the model completely wrong. And you got to remember this, that models are not perfect. They're all imperfect. They could be used for guidance, but you certainly do not want to trust them. Being a modeler myself, I've learned it a long way. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Let's call Marcia Ellis. Yes. And then after Marcia will be William Hoffling.
So, good morning. How are you? My name is Marcia Ellis. I'm representing myself as well as the Inner Loop Working Group. You can find out more information and more concerns are detailed on our website, theinnerloopworkinggroup.com. And I created a PowerPoint, which I don't seem to have access to, which has been uploaded.
Pause the timer real quick. can we go ahead and put up their PowerPoint? We've done that.
Also sent it as a PDF.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, because I'm looking here on your desktop, and I did contact Janet yesterday with a PDF version in case there were any issues transmitting that large document. I have it on Flash.
Let's go ahead and see if we can get somebody to load it up, Glenn, or our technical guy. Yeah, here he comes.
Great, wonderful. So it's Small Brothers PowerPoint Final. Oh, thank you.
This isn't professional.
Is it the same thing? Is it the same thing you posted for the Women for Better League Facebook page? Is it the same thing you posted there?
I didn't post the PowerPoint there. I did some, I just finished it yesterday. So I think I may have posted something that was working, and then I got it done yesterday morning super early and emailed it to Janet.
You had something on there about
That's
contacting us and everything?
All right, so I'm going to advance with a left click.
Yeah, it'll operate just like your.
So we're going to go to view.
Should be good.
Thank you. All right, gentlemen.
Go ahead
So
and start the timer then. All right, thank you.
it's going to be a dense, packed 5 minutes. So first of all, we're the Inner Loop Working Group, and we have come to being in order to represent the integrity and the safety of the folks that live within that 17-mile loop. That is, let me see, view.
If you go down at the bottom.
Slideshow here?
Yep, perfect.
Oh, great, thank you. All right, so here's a little bit about us. We represent the inner loop within Alico, Ben Hill, and Corkscrew. So first of all, I would just like to say that y'all just don't know when to let go of a bad idea, and this is a bad idea. So here's the property background. We have 2 commercial properties that were zoned prior to 1990. We have the Corkscrew Country Store, which is on page 11. The detail is it has no wetlands or existing flowways. Clearly, that's a complication for your development plans. And then there's the Flint Penn Strand Trailer Park. This is from 1982. This is the site plan. So we were going to have those sewage facilities out by the road and put the trailer park back there in the Southwest Florida management area, that flowway. So I couldn't find any more information, but this is a conceptual idea of what you would be looking like had that been developed. We had lots of great ideas from 1982. Here's a sampling of other great ideas that have persisted. Uh-oh, incoming call here. Got to contact my commissioner. All right, hello, Cecil. You're representing this district, so I just want to let you know that what's being presented doesn't necessarily represent everyone who has interest.
Please make sure you're kind of bordering on personal attacks here. Let's not do that.
We're countywide.
Really, yeah.
We're actually like.
I'm trying to lighten things up.
Yeah.
So what's going on here is we're transferring this commercial zoning, and this is way too wet for development. There's a reason that we didn't even put a trailer park there. We got wetlands and a whale field. It's a dangerous intersection as we have cement trucks and dump trucks merging with families as they're attempting to go shopping. This was identified as a conservation priority 2 property, and it serves a vital connector for Wild Turkey Strand to the Flint Penn Strand. We have existing extensive staff reports monitoring for those well fields. We don't really know what the costs are to advance this property. So this is an important corridor. As I said earlier, we've got flow that's moving and wildlife that's moving through this connector. So what is the 300,000 square feet that have been allotted for development? We do have existing frontage that for development that could happen in front of Bellaterra and Wild Blue. There's really no reason to develop this particular property. There's only 60,000 available in places in the application where it refers to 80,000. And I really do want to know, what is the cost to develop this small parcel, these 4 acres, to the Lee County taxpayer? So I'm just asking, I'm posing some questions that I think really do need to be answered before we move towards transmittal. How does this compare to the other CC parcels that have been approved for commercial development within this corridor? I really want to know, and those are some of the questions. So when we take a look here, we're looking back at that hydrologic study. We can see that there is some flowway confusion, there's some drainage confusion, and in all honesty, we're working with Youngquist in good faith to try to resolve some of these issues. I'm speaking from the point of the residential area up here in Devore. All right, we've contacted Natural Resources and been working with them for over a year to try to work with some of these issues. If we look here, we see a lower elevation of the Flint Penn Strand, and so just like when you pull a plug out of the bathtub, you can expect the water to go to that lowest point. Just because we want it to go to the southwest, and that is an easier narrative to understand, doesn't mean that that's actually how it's going to go. Again, apologize for that. It's a little bit out of focus, but we clearly have some flooding issues that are of grave concern in this area. And these are some of the hydrological maps that I think are relevant that look at the structures that are in place to try to control the water in this area. Like I say, we have ongoing monitoring where we have wells that are installed in some of the properties mentioned in the staff report to try to better understand the flow. Long-standing citizens are concerned because our residents have been omitted from some of the land use maps, and we feel like that our existence hasn't been fully considered by the commissioners in other decisions.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay, I'm sorry I couldn't present more and apologize for my technical delays.
Very good. Let's call William Hoffling and then Courtney Legree.
For the record, this is actually in District 3, so Commissioner Sindel, you're the winner here. You get to get this great project in your district. So I wish it was my district, but it's actually in District 3, but thank you.
Nice to see the support for the governor there. We love the governor. Morning.
Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I've lived along the Corkscrew corridor since 2001. I've lived in Pelican Sound, Bellaterra, and Grandeza. So I'm very, very familiar with the traffic flows and what's going on there. We are in a crisis on Corkscrew. The traffic is absolutely terrible. It's worse than when I lived in New York. And it has taken me an hour to get from Bellaterra to Complete Dentistry in Astoria, which is 10 miles away. It's taken me a half hour to get from Bellaterra to get a cup of coffee in the shopping center at Publix. All the traffic flow has been east to west. We've got two huge developments going up now that are going to further complicate it. People talk about the road widening to 2 lanes on each side. That's still not going to be enough when the rest of the housing has been put in, unless there are some north-south corridors put in as proposed in Grandeza or Lico. I normally would be opposed to a development like this because I think it's overdeveloped, but in this case, I'm not. I'm actually for it and think it should move fast. There's no place to go for anybody to get a cup of coffee, a haircut, a slice of pizza, other than to fight the traffic that is built up forever. And we talk about the development of the highway. That's not going to be the total solution to this. We really have to start looking at moving traffic going from west to east. And I think this is a great step in the right direction. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
All right, Courtney Legree, followed by Kara Kopsell.
My name is Courtney Legree. I'm currently a resident of Bellaterra, have been since 2008. As you're all aware, there's explosive growth with 7+ communities. Currently, as Mr. Hoffman also expressed, obviously Corkscrew is very inconvenient for us residents at this time. You have the elementary school traffic can be upwards of 30 minutes going towards the Miramar outlets. You have Hertz Arena with event nights. Traffic is being shuffled each way, so to get a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk is quite the feast. Also, you have FGCU in season, so that also adds a lot to just that little Ben Hill Griffin area. So I do believe that this new growth is imperative for us folks, Bellaterra and Corkscrew Shores. You also have Wild Blue, and then the Place, which is huge. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, Kara Kopsell, followed by Kevin Drzezinski. Morning.
Morning. Thank you for the time. I'd just like to vocalize my support for this effort as well. I'm new to Bellaterra earlier this year. I used to live in the Forum right here in Fort Myers. Luckily with the Forum, I had many alternative routes and options to go for groceries, pharmacy, etc. In Bellaterra, as my two previous neighbors have said as well, all the traffic is going on just one side. So I do want to vocalize my support in this because with all the developments, all the traffic is going to increase, and we do need alternative options for groceries, pharmacy, things like that.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments this morning. Kevin Drzezinski, followed by Jemiah Lampett. Counselor, good morning.
Morning. I'll be brief, and for an attorney, that's probably unusual to hear. But in any event, I'm here as a private citizen. I live in Wildcat Run. I've been there since 1987. I also have property and own a house at Bellaterra, which both are west of this development. And I also own property, acreage east of this development. I'm supportive of this program to keep, start with some of the harder questions on the ecological stuff. That's something you and staff will deal with. But the traffic is significant, as you've heard earlier. I look at it also from a perspective, and I respect the fact that there's ecological issues to be resolved. I sat for 13 years on the Corkscrew Road Service Advisory Board, and our goal was to collect monies to widen Corkscrew Road and also take into consideration some of the problems. And that was from the mid-'90s to the 2000s. And we were able to raise enough money. We did just east of this is the Panther Overpass. We raised $1 million and put that in just to protect the Panther, which was an admirable situation. We advocated, though, some of us on the advisory board knew what was coming with Bellaterra before it broke ground and all the other developments. We knew that there was a need to road widen. Now there's a need to get some type of relief from the traffic. It's immensely problematic. And one of the things I run into, if I'm going south on 75 and I have a hearing in Naples, I've got to leave an hour earlier just to take a chance because I can't be late. Now, with Zoom meetings, that may not be important, but we'll be back in place. But same thing everyone's experienced. That is a terrible roadway to be on. We didn't get it done to four-lane it. They used the money to make a parkway effect. I wasn't supportive of that. I thought we needed 4 lanes 10 or 15 years ago. We need 6 lanes out there. But this will at least help. It'll be a community center to service those people that are further east. That'll relieve traffic congestion, as everyone's pointed out. I think it's important to have, and that's why I support it. I've also talked to some of my other neighbors this morning, some of whom own a substantial amount of property in the acreage that I own just east of there, and they're also supportive of having additional commercial so that relieves them from traveling all the way to the interstate or Miramar outlet area to get service. So that's all I had to say, and I did it in 50% less time. Thank you.
Nailed it. All right, thank you, sir. All right, Jemiah Lampett.
Good morning. My name is Jamie Lampett.
Oh, Jamie, I apologize.
That's okay. I just wanted to vocalize my support along with my neighbors. I also live in Bellaterra. I've been a Estero resident for 31 years. So I've seen the immense growth, but I do believe that it still needs another commercial project to the east of Bellaterra to alleviate all the traffic that you've heard about this morning. I'm the mother of 2 small kids, and getting stuck in school traffic, in dump truck traffic, and just traffic in general is tough when you have a doctor's appointment, kids have to be to school, whatever the case might be. Just sitting in traffic is not fun, but I know that going just down the block to a grocery store to get medication, food, dinner, whatever we need will be of benefit. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your comments this morning. Raise your hand if anybody else wants to speak in public comment. Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Commissioners, it's back to us. Do we have any questions or discussion? Commissioner Manning?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve this transmittal, both CPAs, according to the LPA and the staff.
All right, very good. So we have a motion for approval from Commissioner Manning. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming down. Thanks to all the staff being involved. It's great to hear from the residents that actually live on Corkscrew Road that's actually impacted by this. So we heard you last year, too, on these other projects. So thank you for coming down and taking your time out on a Wednesday to come down and tell us about your community, that's how it actually impacts you, because you actually live in that neighborhood. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Sandelli?
Same type of thing, especially it's interesting to see the young people that have families and they have needs beyond, perhaps other members of the community, and the efficiency that they need to get and the convenience that they need. So I especially thank the young people, whether it's this meeting or the ones before, that have come to express their needs.
Very good. All right. What further questions or comments do we have?
Just these, and I appreciate the neighbors coming in and talking about how convenient it would be to have stores closer to them. In my case, that kind of falls on deaf ears because I live 6 miles from the nearest Publix, and I have to drive that far to get back. But I do what you guys do. You stop on the way home. You plan your trips. You don't wait for the crises to come. Most of the time, it's rare that I have to jump in a car and run up 6 miles to get to Publix. My main concern here, though, is the continual cumulative impact of chipping away at the DRGR. And if we, I've said this before in various settings, that as I've watched the evolution of the DRGR since 1990, I have seen it just deteriorate. We seem to use it as a holding pattern until the next developer comes along and has an idea, and then we tinker with this and tinker with that and say, okay, well, that won't be that bad of an impact. But the cumulative impact just continues to eat away at the full intent of what the DRGR was initially adopted for. This is not that totally devastating, but it's just one more chip in the underpinnings of what holds up the DRGR and made it worth adopting in the first place. And there's something that could be done here, but not to the extent that we're contemplating by this comp plan amendment. So once again, I'm not able to support my wonderful colleagues with their full best intentions here on this project.
Okay. All right, any further comments then?
Again, this action today is only to transmit to the state. It's no approval of anything. It's just to transmit. So just for the record, so if anybody's watching.
Okay, very good. All right, if there are no further comments, then I'll go ahead and call the question. Are there any objections to the motion?
Just one down here.
All right.
Thank you.
Motion carries 4-1 with Commissioner Mann objecting. And we have no further business before us this morning. We're adjourned. Thank you.